Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where we chat with startup founders and solopreneurs just like you from all over the globe. During our chat today, picture yourself starting your own startup journey. If our guests can do it, you can too. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Podbrand Media. Let Podbrand create and host your company-branded podcast. Learn more at podbrandmedia.com. This is Kevin Pruitt with Rising Tide Startups. It is my joy and pleasure to host this podcast. I have a very special guest with me today, Ken Mack. Ken, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate that. Hey, one question before I ask you. You're obviously, I think Glasgow is home. Was that correct originally? Or want to ask you, are you blue or green?
If I had to pick a color, I'd probably say blue, but I don't focus so much on football these days. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I was born in just outside Glasgow, Scotland.
That's a beautiful part of the country. Actually, Scotland is my favorite country or favorite area on the planet. I think it's just a magical place and been there many times. But man, if you and I met at a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
I just want to say, first of all, that Scotland would be more of a magical place if it stopped raining so much, because it just continuously rains. And that would be a good day in Scotland if we had 3 or 4 days without rain. But it's consistently raining here, which is not so magical for us. But yeah, if we bumped into each other at a networking event, I think the simple way nowadays I just introduce myself is just to say I'm an investor entrepreneur. Because I think many entrepreneurs have got the same problem about answering, that question. Being an entrepreneur, it could mean many things and doing many things, multiple streams of income. So I tend to just simplify it nowadays and just say, I'm an investor entrepreneur.
It's really interesting. I mean, there are so many, looking at like your LinkedIn profile and just, some other interviews you've done. I mean, you've got so many things that you've been involved with over the years. But if there was a tagline that would describe you, maybe describe your journey, what would that look like?
I probably describe myself as eccentric, very adventurous, no fear. So many bad things have happened to me before over the last 20 years that have kind of got no emotion. So in terms of a tagline, I'd probably just say the eccentric entrepreneur.
And getting up every morning, what does a day look like in the life of Ken Mack? I'm sure no two are the same.
Yeah, so I tend to. I came from a very working class background back in the day, working at McDonald's, and having to force myself out of sleep at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. So I get trauma from having to wake up with an alarm clock. So I prefer to wake up naturally, let my body sleep through the cycle, and then wake up. And that's usually about between 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. I'll get out of bed, and the very first thing I'm going to do is go down into the kitchen, and I'm going to make myself some electrolyte mix, so with potassium, magnesium, and sodium. So I'm going to have that in a glass of water first of all, and I'm going to have a black coffee. I'm going to sit, enjoy my black coffee, and I'm going to look through my emails, my messages, and I'm going to have a think. I'm going to sit there for half an hour and think about what I'm going to be doing today. And then I'm either going to do one or two things. I'm going to go to a MMA training session to learn. I'm training how to fight just now over the last 2 years. Or I'm going to go to the gym and do a workout. When I come back from the gym, I'm going to cook myself 5 eggs every single day, 5 eggs. And then I'm going to come into the office. I'm going to address the agenda, which would consist of looking at various of the different companies that I own. And sometimes there's a task or two that I need to attend to. Or I'll be looking at, I run a coaching company teaching people how to buy businesses, and I'll be looking at what's happening in my coaching community. Some of the students I'm partnering on deals with, so we're buying businesses together, and usually there's some kind of associated tasks that I need to do that day. And I'll pretty much stay in the office all day until it's 9 o'clock at night now in the UK at the time of doing this show, and I'll be here until about midnight, and I'll do that 5 days a week like a military style operation. And then at the weekend I'm going to enjoy myself time by myself and with the family. But being an entrepreneur, I think many of our listeners can would agree that being an entrepreneur is a very lonely place, and most of our network is in the online space. You and me are speaking now online. And this is how nowadays we tend to find new friends. and new business partners is connecting online. Because I guess that the entrepreneurs, business owners are kind of like in the 1% and the
Hmm.
2%. So it's very difficult to find people that resonate and speak our language, and that's typically in the online space, unless you live in a big city like Dubai. I've got a home there, Miami, New York, London. But typically, a lot of entrepreneurs that are staying outside of the cities in the smaller towns, less than 100,000 population, are definitely going to struggle to connect with like-minded people.
I have a theory. I mean, I've done probably 350 plus interviews kind of in this space, and I've developed a theory over time just talking to, startup founders that, there are there seems to be two types of people. One are kind of this born entrepreneur, probably have this genetic disposition to start things and create things and are probably not very employable as an employee. And then you have the others that might have just come up with a good idea, like I just had a great product or a great company idea and it started, and I run a company, so to speak, or I've developed an idea. Would you fall in one or two of those camps, or do you just think about that theory? I mean, would you agree that there are some of us that are just born with kind of that entrepreneurial bent that says, hey, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail?
Yeah, I've heard a theory that, it's either in the blood or it's not. I would say that I was definitely born with the entrepreneur spirit from a very, very young age. I wasn't given anything, so I always had to create things and find a way to get things. But I was always looking for a way to hack the system and find a quicker way, more efficient way of doing things. And I guess I would question everything, and that's why
Mm.
I never, I would never have classified myself as a good employee. I was, I guess, unemployable, where many entrepreneurs would probably say the same thing. So, is it in the blood? Maybe it is. Could you become an entrepreneur? Maybe you could, but it's a journey, and not so much a destination.
Right.
It's a lifestyle, and it's not something you can just decide. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. It consists of a big roller coaster adventure, and it's got many ups, many downs, and it's a lifestyle that's I guess can be very difficult for a certain type of partner. If you're
Hmm.
going to meet somebody, they need to understand who you are and what comes with being an entrepreneur.
I appreciate that, and I would agree. I think that there is a kind of a genetic like disposition that some people just have, and I like the way you've used the word adventure twice already in a very short time, and you mentioned journey just a second ago, and I'd like to camp on that just a second. So, jump in that wayback machine and that time machine and go back to kind of early days of Ken Mack. What are some things that happened or that twist of fate that said, hey, I need to start building things for myself. I need to create a company. I need to start a business type thing. Talk about those early days.
Yeah, it probably goes back to when I was about 13 or 14 years of age. I had a passion for motorsport and I always wanted to get a motorbike. My parents would never buy me a motorbike for obvious reasons. Obviously, your mother doesn't want you to have an accident. So I thought I need to find a way to buy myself a motorbike. So I created this patio furniture cleaning business in a local caravan site not far from my home near Glasgow. And I'd managed to amass enough money to buy this Czechoslovakian MZ 1950s motorcycle, which I brought home. And my mother wasn't very happy about it, but I was able to buy it for myself. But yeah, a bit of a tour rag back in the day. I would be riding about the local streets with no license in this Czechoslovakian 1950s motorcycle, breaking the rules.
And
But
working on it every weekend, repairing it every weekend.
that's it. Absolutely, yeah. But I guess that's where it all started. Was just finding a way to make my own money, not being given anything in life. I get out of life school as well, in many jobs. In and out of every working class type job that you can think of, from cleaner, working in McDonald's, even call centers. So I was working whilst I was in school.
Hmm.
Had a little business as well. But then I kind of got to the point where I thought, you know what, I'm unemployable. I'm going to keep on getting sacked, or I can't keep my attention on this one job. I think the longest I held down a job was maybe about a year and a half.
Yep.
I thought, it's time. Ain't going to go to college, ain't going to go to university. There's one or two decisions I'm going to have to make. Number one is I need to start a business, but I've got no knowledge. I don't know how to start a business. Where do you start? I've got no skills, no qualifications. Maybe I can become a cleaner because, or I can start a cleaning business because I guess anybody can clean, right? Or I can buy a business. And
Hmm.
then that's where the whole business buying journey started for me because I thought, well, if I learn how to buy a business, then I can buy a business and watch how the business operates because it's got all of the staff, the processes, the procedures, all of the resources in place. And that's where it all started for me. It made sense to buy a business instead of starting a business.
So what was that first business that you bought?
Cleaning business. I bought my, so the landlord at the time, this was a long time ago, nearly 20 years ago, and he had a window cleaning business that he had neglected. So he said, Ken, if you're able to put this business back together, I'll take you around the houses. I'll point out the houses to you of where the old clients were. If you're able to put this back together, you can have the business. So I knocked all the doors of the old clients. I said, my name is Ken. I've just taken over Mike's business. I'm the new window cleaner in town. Here is my details. If you'd like services to start up again, then give me a call and I'll be here next week. So within the space of 3 or 4 weeks, I put together this beautiful window cleaning business, resurrected this business, and it lasted for about 3 or 6 months. It's going very, very well. And then I sold that. That's when I sold my first business to my father's window cleaner. So he then bought the window cleaning round off me that I resurrected. I thought, wow, now this has given me my first lift. And I become fascinated with this landlord of mine who gave me this business. I thought,
Hmm.
Mike, what else do you do? And he had this commercial cleaning business, and he said he had 10 staff, and they would go out to various different commercial premises and clean for him. I thought, wow, that's fascinating. Maybe I can do the same thing. So then that's when I went out and I found a small commercial cleaning business for sale, and I bought it.
Do you have a history of like taking businesses that are struggling and kind of rehab them, or are they successful when you step into them, or is it kind of a mix?
I've been involved in distressed businesses, so buying businesses that are pre-bankruptcy, that are struggling, that are on the brink of being insolvent, where basically they can't pay their own debts. So I've taken over these businesses before. Very, very stressful. Would I do it again? No. I've been involved in many different types of businesses of all different sizes, from a third division football club in Spain, so buying a football club that's struggling in Spain, buying the biggest LED lighting manufacturing company in the in South America, Brazil. That was a $50 million revenue company.
Wow.
So I've been in many different distressed business situations, and it's not good fun at all. It takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of experience, and you need to have a plan better than the CEO of the company that was in there. And like, if you don't have a plan of what you're going to do differently than what that CEO or team was doing, then the business is going to shut down. It ain't going to work. And this is where I started the journey of just buying businesses after this moment in time that were profitable and established, and had found out that it's possible to buy these businesses through a process you call LBO, a leveraged buyout, where you can buy the
Hmm.
business with little to none of your own money down. So in
Right.
the USA, for example, as you know, you've got the SBA, so you can get an SBA loan
Hmm.
for 90 to 95% of a business up to $5 million worth of value, and you only need to put down 10, 5 or 10%. So, you can very easily in the USA do an LBO on pretty much any business that could be SBA approved within 48 hours. So it's an incredible system you've got over there in USA. So I thought, what's the point in buying a distressed business? Yes, you can get them with no money down, but if you can also buy a profitable and established business with no money down as well. So then the whole distress thing didn't make any sense to me.
Hmm.
So it's better to buy something that's 10 or 20 years of age, that's stood the test of time,
Right.
that's got an established client base, that's time tested, so it's gone through all of these different crises, and it's operating without the owner being part of the day-to-day operations.
Hmm.
Like that's like the ultimate wealth hack, to identify one of these businesses that's on bizbuysell.com, And many of the businesses, as you probably know, you can buy them as seller finance, where the seller becomes the
Hmm.
bank. I was just working on a deal in Colorado and Denver, and it was a paint body shop, beautiful body shop that owns the premises, and that was 70% seller finance. So that means that you can either come in with an SBA loan, or you can bring an
Hmm.
investor to the table, or your own capital to fund that 30% deposit that's required to buy that business, and then 70% seller finance, and the seller would have a first lien over the premises
Right.
and the company. So, like, it doesn't in my head doesn't make any sense to start a business because of the struggles. It's
Hmm.
going to take you years before you can get paid, usually 2 or 3 years before you can pull some kind of salary from the business. And you just end up doing so many different tasks. You're becoming the accountant, credit control, you become the marketing department, and you end up wearing all of these different hats in the business. And it takes the whole fun and meaning out of being an entrepreneur out of the equation, because we all become entrepreneurs for one reason, and that's to get our freedom back. But you're giving up your freedom and your
Hmm.
soul to start a business. It's very, very difficult. So, I've been at both ends of the spectrum, but I've been starting businesses, commercial cleaning businesses, and I've been buying them. And one of the lessons and takeaways that I've learned from buying and starting is that it's much easier and quicker just to buy your customers and buy your revenue
Yeah.
rather than starting a business and finding your customers.
No doubt about it. Another advantage that I see of buying, of not buying distressed businesses, you're not taking on a lot of debt. You're not assuming a lot of debt that the owner couldn't get out of, so to speak, that might be tied up in the business. But yeah, I love that model. If you had to go back a few years, maybe quite a few years, tell me, like, if you were starting tomorrow, with virtually, little or no cash, what would you do? What would be some of the steps you would like encourage our listeners to take if they think that I love this model? I certainly think that we could do this. We could kind of buy a small business and that one that has, is a going concern, that has good leverage and good customers and a good track record. Where would you look to find these? And, what would be some of the first steps you would look to, like, how are you even doing due diligence, I guess, early stage?
So I just want to think back to one of my students and a deal that he did. Uh, so that was back in November last year, so a couple of months ago. That was a print manufacturing company in the UK, which is it's many times harder to buy a business in the UK with no money down as it would be in the USA. Now, thinking about the listener now that doesn't have much money, that would like a start in life, that would like to find a business that doesn't require a big capital injection or any capital injection. So the print manufacturing company that we just acquired, that was a no money down deal. Now that business was found on the open market. Normally, we're going to buy data from a data supplier. So we're going to
Hmm.
identify a niche, and then we're going to write out to these companies through a marketing company. So we're going to get them to write a letter to the owner of the company, just say, hey, this is such and such. We're looking at buying a business in this sector in this town. If you've thought about making an exit from this business, then get in touch. Here are my contact details. Let's speak. And then that way you get rid of the broker, because the brokers quite often can end up messing up the deals and they're very difficult to deal with.
Mm.
I had a deal yesterday that I just, I chucked out because the broker was just making life very difficult, and it was a gym in New York. There are many deals that can be done on the open market if you get a good broker. A lot of the time you have sellers that are listing the businesses on
Hmm.
bizbuysell.com directly. You can get an account with BizBuySell free of charge, and you can filter the results by seller finance. And just as a rule of thumb as well, I tend to look for a deal that has got at least 50% seller finance. Now,
Hmm.
not every deal needs to have seller finance. The print manufacturing company that we just bought, maybe 10% seller finance, but we've leveraged the assets, we've released the equity in the factory, and then we raised various different acquisition loans. You could just say, for the sake of making things simple, similar to the SBA.
Hmm.
and then that was the down payment for the seller. Now, let's say that our listener now has identified a business that's for sale on the open market on Biz Buy Sell, and there's 50% seller finance on the table. The question is, where can I get the other 50% from? So there is a loan program in the USA called the SBA 7A, and that's a government-backed scheme that's going to give you up to 90% of the value of the business with you putting down a 10% deposit. Now, you could bring a partner to the table that has experience in that niche that's going to fund the 10%, or you could raise investment capital. And what we do with the investors is very clever. We treat it a bit like a secured interest only loan.
Hmm.
So we would give the investor 10% ROI on, so let's say they put in 100K, they'll get £10,000 paid every quarter or every month, whatever the arrangement is that you make. If we buy the business on a one times multiple of the cash flow, which is the usual multiple at the moment, we would then repackage the equity on a 2 or 3x and then sell that at a higher multiple to the investor, meaning we don't need to give away so much of the equity of the company. And then we give the investor a guaranteed buyback of the share capital after 5 years so that they give the shares back and then we give them the initial investment back. So it's a bit like a secured loan. They get the
Yeah.
security and once you pay the money back, then you get the shares back in the company. So there's many, many different ways of skinning the cat. So I'm just trying to keep things simple,
Hmm.
so that I don't want to complicate anything and make this sound difficult because I can assure you that it's not difficult. It's a straightforward process. And I think it's more about a mindset thing for most people and the fear of buying a business, the fear
Hmm.
of sitting in front of a business owner. Because, thinking back to the younger Ken Mack, like I almost had a fear of sitting in front of these big CEOs because I kind of seen them like these people with this godlike complex, and it made me feel uneasy. It made me feel like I had imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
and I didn't feel good. Like I really had to force myself into that environment to go and visit the factory and sit in the boardroom. And I felt very intimidated because I was just this young guy with not a lot of money behind me. I just had a big set of balls. I had a desire to learn, and inside my head, it was all or nothing. I had to do this regardless. It was non-negotiable. And I've done it so much now that it just becomes very natural. I'm okay to sit in front of a director of a company that's doing 100 million per year because I've kind of trained myself, I've desensitized myself to, I've got rid of that fear. So I think it's just a case of going out there and getting used to or getting comfortable with
Hmm.
feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because, as we both know, nothing happens within the comfort zone. In the comfort zone, I think it's a very bad place to be. So you always need to force yourself to feeling uncomfortable. Just like you and me now speaking on the camera, a lot of people are scared about speaking on camera. And even, me as well. I was running YouTube shows for years, and it took me a long time to get used to speaking on the camera. And when you start just pushing yourself outside that comfort zone, that's when good things start happening.
There's no doubt about it. That what is that? The magic happens outside the comfort zone type thing. But
100%.
you mentioned like one times cash flow, but you didn't say anything about profit margin. Didn't say anything about, what's the current ROI? What's the, you didn't say anything about EBITDA. I mean, so are you looking for certain companies that are, I mean, obviously you want companies that are profitable and that they're doing, fairly well, but is there kind of a hey, I want a 20% profit margin. I want a, or does it just have to be positive cash flow?
You mentioned EBITDA. If you want to, there's a little hack that we use. If you want to buy low and sell high, usually when you see the businesses listed on the open market, the broker is going to list the business on a multiple of the EBITDA.
Mhm.
So that's the earnings before interest and tax. And what that allows
Right.
them to do as if this magically inflated number, which gets the seller this bigger exit. So what we do, especially when we do the direct to vendor, so when we create the deal flow, we're writing out to companies to say we would like to buy your company, we would value the company on a multiple of the free cash flow, so just the annual
Hmm.
profits of the company. So our valuation model is very simple. It's let's say one times multiple of the cash flow that allows us to buy lower, plus the net assets less the liabilities. So quite often when
Mm.
you buy a company, so we don't do that asset sales, we buy the actual shares in a company. And quite often the company is going to have some loans, some credit card debt, some
Hmm.
overdraft, maybe some cash flow loans. So we would just calculate what the unsecured debts are and then deduct that from the purchase price. So
Mm.
it's almost like an immediate loan,
Yep.
an immediate way to lower the barrier of entry to you buying that company, because you can effectively use that as financing and just say to the owner, hey, we will take on this debt so that you don't need to pay it off and we just take it off the purchase price. So the cash flow is the multiple that we use to buy low. If you want to then prep the company to sell the company, then you want to sell on a multiple of the EBITDA. Again, a rule of thumb is anything that's kind of under $500,000 per year, you should be buying that for about a one times multiple of the cash flow. Anything between 500,000 and a million, you should be paying expect to pay 2 to 2.5 times
Hmm.
multiple of the free cash flow. And just in terms of the profitability as well, you want to make sure that let's just if we're going to speak about numbers, have a purchase price of about $1 million. The company's doing about $1 million of revenue. I would be expecting to see somewhere around about 300,000, so about 30% profit margin, so about £300,000 worth of cash flow, well, USDs, since we're
Right.
speaking USDs. And the reason for that amount is we are going to want to add new debt. We want to introduce new debt into this company so that we can use the debt to buy the company.
Hmm.
And we want to be able to pay ourselves.
Yep.
One of the most important things in business I have learned is number one, you need to pay yourself. So if you're buying a company and you've thrown all this new debt into the company, it can be very demotivating if you're not actually able to pay
Hmm.
yourself something. Because it's not like you can just go in there and expect to stand back and do nothing. It doesn't work like that. You're going to have to do something, maintain the company, even if you want to work above the company. So I would always allow for 200,000 USDs towards paying the debt of that acquisition that you're paying $1 million for, and then that's going to leave about 100,000 USDs in the bank account. 50,000 you might be able to pay to yourself, and then 50,000 you can leave in the company for the working capital to not
Hmm.
wring the debt out of the company. And during that first 12 months, what you want to do is you want to look at ways of not just saving costs in the company, you want to look at ways of expanding the client base. How can I find new business? How can I introduce new business into this company? I'll give
Right.
you a live example. Now, today, I get some very, very good news. We just got a £300,000 GBP client. So they're going to give us £300,000 worth of business a year. Where did this client come from? This client was an ex-client of the print manufacturing company that we just purchased. They stopped doing business with our companies. We wrote out to all the old clients and said, hey, we're now the new owners of the company. Why did you stop working with us? They fell out with the owner of
Mm.
the company, the guy
Wow.
that owned the company before us. Now we're back in bed with them. They love what we're doing, and they've given us a huge contract, which now, this business, for example, is £1 million worth of revenue. That increases the revenue of the company by 20 to
Mm.
30%. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So today was a
In
very
one
good day
day.
for us. And the guy that's partnered with me, he came from the kind of property background, renting out properties. So this for him is it's a complete game changer. It's
Hmm.
a paradigm shift in the way that you build wealth, because now we've just bought this company and we've introduced this new client that's giving us plus 300. So out of that, if we get 20, 30% net profit, that's a lot of money. So now that money goes towards us. That's money that we didn't account for when
Hmm.
we run the cash flow forecast of the affordability when buying the company, to work out the debt and how much we can pay ourselves. and allocate towards the debts. Now we've got this new amount of money that's coming into the company, so we can like, okay, we can actually make a little bit of money now, which is nice.
I mean, I love the approach you take because it's almost like you have almost forced yourself into starting with a clean slate. You know, if you've
Yeah,
accounted for all the debt on the very front end, you know, it's almost like you start with a fresh, model, almost like a startup without any debt on the books, type thing, because
yeah.
you kind of built that into the acquisition. But what have you run into? I mean, it sounds like to me that you're an absentee owner of a lot of things. You
Yeah.
know, how do you manage that? I mean, you're going to buy this car repair, service in Colorado and living in Glasgow or Dubai or wherever you happen to be at the time. I mean, that's a long way. That's a couple of three
Yeah.
flights away. So how do buying a business is one thing. Actually, the day-to-day operation is completely a new issue. How do you handle that?
I guess we can think about some of these influential figures, a bit like Richard Branson. This guy in Necker Island, he's got like 500 companies. And think about, how does Richard Branson, how is he able to have so many companies and manage and control everything? It's all about the team. It's all about buying a
Hmm.
company that's got an established team of experts that have been working in there. Not I call it the revolving door to hell. When imagine a restaurant, you get people coming in and out, in and out. It's a hellish business to buy. I've been many of them, and I will never ever buy another restaurant again. But that's another story. But let's speak about
Wise.
a business that's well established with a well established staff team. There's a bit like a family that understands the integral mechanisms and that are able to operate uh, on their own initiative with an operations manager, with an owner
Hmm.
who we have now replaced and then delegated the tasks of the owner. Usually, what we find is once the owner has got to a very mature stage, they've stopped micromanaging in the company
Hmm.
because you can't grow the company if you're micromanaging. This is not possible. We've delegated some accounts, some invoicing, some purchase ledger, some sales ledger, some credit control. So we've now delegated all of these tasks. And usually, if I'm buying a company with one of the students, he would be kind of overseeing the operations manager. But
Yep.
again, he would be absent from the business as well. And we are at the stage where we would be visiting the business maybe once a month or once every 2 months. I've got companies there that's, very successful manufacturing operations. I've only been to twice. One of them actually, I bought in 2021. I've only been there 2 times in my life. The staff really don't know who I am. I sit right on the back end as a shareholder, so a lot of people think the CEO, director is the top
Hmm.
guy, but that's not the case.
Hmm.
We have a structure where we have companies that own companies, and then we're just a shareholder of the company that owns a
Right.
company, kind of thing. So, um, I was thinking about it today, right? I was training some MMA. I'm like, wow, yeah, I'm training MMA. I've just received this video of like, I've got guys in a factory that's working on a satellite that's going to space. Is we have this PTFE spraying company, so it's Teflon, which they spray on some of these satellites. I'm like, wow, these guys are spraying satellites that are going to space, and I'm here training MMA. I'm like, this is insane. This is so cool. Like, I love like creative companies that are making something and doing very odd niche things. And that's, the types of businesses I've ended up with, over the past few years is these very interesting businesses that you would never ever think of creating. The business that we bought in 2021, the is a packaging manufacturing company, the one I only visited twice in my life. That company alone produces 60% of the entire global supply of toothpaste tubes, is responsible for the sealing. The bottom of the
Hmm.
toothpaste tube, how it's got this hard seal. So we make
Right.
this very interesting component that they use for heat sealing that goes into the machines which close the bottom of the toothpaste tubes. So we're given this crazy stat from our factory that's responsible for 60% of the entire global supply. We ship this product all over the world. So it's just like you can get yourself into all of these crazy, very interesting businesses that are owned by the baby boomers, and they're retiring at
Yep.
10,000 per day. So
Yep.
that for us this is the opportunity, and this is what we're focusing on. Is not businesses that, 30, 40-year-old Ken Mack's on, looking at, selling the business and moving to the next best thing. No, 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 no. We're looking at the baby boomer that's retiring from that, that's genuinely ready, that's exhausted, that's been in that business for the last 50 years, is now 70, maybe 80, of business owners at 93, 95 years of age that want out, that are ready to quit. Quite often, the family members, the sons and the daughters, they don't want to take over these
Right.
businesses.
Right.
And like that to me was very interesting because like if my dad had a business, I would be dying to get started and getting involved in the internal mechanisms of the business. So for me, that was very hard to get my head around. But these businesses, man, are all over the place, and baby boomers, 10,000 a day is what they're retiring. 2 million businesses for sale in the USA, 300,000 in the open market in the UK alone. And there's more sellers than there are buyers right now. So this is like the ultimate opportunity. This is why I'm still here. I could have retired fully a long time ago, but there's so much opportunity out there in the market right now that I ain't giving up anytime soon. And there's so many fun businesses that you can go out there and buy, and you can have so much fun out there getting involved with the businesses and making a lot of money.
I mean, I love that. And as we're kind of nearing the end of our time here, I want to take just a moment to thank our sponsors. But when we come back, I want you to kind of drill down on that statistic you talked about with baby boomers. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Pod Brand Media. So you started your own company or branded podcast, and now it's fading. Let Podbrand give it new life. Check out podbrandmedia.com to learn more. Yeah, we are back with Ken Mack. Ken, thanks again for joining us on Rising Tide. But you mentioned a stat just a second ago, 10,000 baby boomers a day. Are those 10,000 business owners that are retiring a day, or just 10,000 baby boomers retiring a day?
10,000 baby boomers. Remembering a lot of these baby boomers had started businesses as well. And, very interestingly, sadly as well, a lot of these businesses, they don't end up finding a buyer and they end up closing their door. Today, I was negotiating with one for my own portfolio, and it was an MOT, so like a garage testing service. The owner of the company is 80 something years of age, and he's still working in there as a testing mechanic. We call it an MOT testing mechanic in the UK every single day. And he's desperate to get out. He can't find a buyer. And the business is, we're at the stage where he's going to give the business for free, but I need to buy the premises. So if I
Mm,
buy the premises, so he gets the value of the premises, the business is a bit of a refresh inside in terms of the equipment that they're using to do all the tests and comply with the new standards that are coming out. But I'm pretty certain that I'm going to get that business for free as long as I
wow.
just buy the property to allow this baby boomer to make an exit, is he can't even find a buyer for the premises. And this is what I mean by a lot of them, they end up just closing their doors. And this is very, very common. And it's sad because they've created these businesses with this staffing culture that becomes a
Hmm.
bit like a family. And then all
Hmm.
of these people end up losing their jobs.
Yeah.
So, you're doing good justice by coming in there and buying their business because you're helping the seller making an exit, and
Hmm.
you're also helping people retain a job.
Yeah, and you're keeping businesses afloat that have been going concerns for, for many, many years, and integral parts of communities, for sure. Man, I love the whole concept of this. If you were starting today, where would you start looking? I mean, obviously you've been in it long enough that you probably have people that are like proactively reaching out to you from time to time, and you're hearing things just, in the network that you have. But if somebody was just fresh off, just starting to really kind of want to follow this strategy or this idea, where would you encourage them to start looking for these opportunities?
The best place to start looking for a business, because I think a good mindset to have is not to have a specific type of business in
Hmm.
mind.
Yeah.
I would take a look on the open market and just start scrolling through the businesses that are on the open market in, let's say, New York, in New Jersey, in Florida, just start looking through, even dial into wherever you're from. If you're in Miami or Naples or Fort Lauderdale, start looking at the businesses in that specific area and just see what takes your fancy, see what the variables are in the description of the business, because you never know what you're going to come across. You might find a business that in the description it says open to 100% seller finance.
Hmm.
It's very possible. And there's many businesses out there that are open to 100% seller finance, 80%, 50%, or maybe it's just a case of you having a conversation with the business owner and then them opening up to you. Like the deal in Colorado, we didn't ask them. They said to us, we're open to 70% maximum seller finance,
Hmm.
1% above SBA.
Mm.
So the best place to start is to look on the open market, but I would also recommend that you take a little bit of time as well to learn. Look online, watch videos online, and take a bit of time to learn about how these things work and study leverage buyout so you understand, you know how to communicate with the business owners and you understand how the process works. There's so many resources out there nowadays online that's going to teach you how to do this.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you kind of guiding our listeners there. As we wrap up today, tell people where you could, they can find out more about your work, maybe your coaching community there. And if there's anything that we just haven't touched on, you think would be just a really good way to wrap this up today, just go ahead and share that.
Yeah, for anybody who would like to follow me, see behind the scenes, see what I'm up to day, I do post a lot on Instagram. So you can follow me at Ken Mack, Ken Mack. And also on my Instagram, there is a link there to some free training that we've just put together, me and my business partner, one of my ex-students actually, and it lasts for about 2 hours and it breaks down the deals that we've done, how you can put them together, how we've put them together, and then there's access to a bit of a community there as well. So it's a good way to get started. Dip your feet in the water. There's no obligation, no cost or anything like that. We're just going to put it together for you guys. And also, I'm always open to speaking to anybody who wants to, just pick my brain for information. Hit me up with a message and just ask me for an opinion. I love speaking to other like-minded individuals. And I do post a lot on social media. But yeah, I think Instagram's a good place to get me, and Facebook as well. At Ken Mack.
I love it. I love it, Ken. Well, thank you so much just for taking time to share with us today. It's been a fascinating chat we've had, and actually went longer than most of our episodes because I just kept having questions I wanted to ask you. So thanks for being very generous with your time and really just for playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Ken, have a great evening. We hope you heard some great takeaways and are now ready to take action yourself. As always, thank you for listening and helping all boats rise in a rising tide.